All right, it looks like we are live. Checking all the streams, guys. Not sure if D Live has started yet. Nope, we are live on D Live as well. So, here we go. Guys, if there are any issues when you come in, I'm going to, chat for a little bit as you guys pour in because I know that not everyone gets here right away. But if you have any issues while I'm streaming, if there's any sound issues, if there is anything, let me know, please, in the chat. Please mention something. If you aren't aware, uh, this is a series that I've been doing basically because uh, my wife is pregnant and my schedule is a little hectic lately. So this Thursday, I won't be able to stream because we have a doctor's appointment and it is out of town. Well, not a doctor's appointment, but an appointment at the birthing center with the midwives. So it'll be this week will be obviously here every day, but not Thursday. And of course, Wednesday night we will be over on the Ends Justify the Memes. If you guys did not see yesterday, hey Dollhuck, if you didn't see yesterday, we had Aiden Paladin on the Ends Justify the Memes. Was one of the reasons why we started doing a Sunday show was for folks like her who live across the pond and have scheduling issues. So we'll probably return to just having a call-in show next week or something. We'll talk about something. But go check that out. It was a good time. It was fun. I was not feeling the best because I was trying to cure a hangover from the night before because we had a lot of folks over at our house. But I also wanted to talk about the something I mentioned on the stream yesterday that wasn't something I wanted to make a big deal of, but did here, and that was I got called by a pollster on Friday. And typically, if I have time and it's not super annoying, I will try to speak with the pollsters. And it was a nice young lady who's very chatty and talkative, and we discussed politics, and I gained a sub, which is really cool. So thank you so much for that sub, and I hope that whatever content I produce, you will follow and enjoy. Um, we talked for a while. She seemed like a nice young girl with a good head on her shoulders. And the main thing was they were polling. The survey was about what we thought of Trump, Biden, Joe Manchin, since he is my senator here, and I don't know, just stuff like that. Oh, changing the filibuster, which I'm generally against. Now, she sped off a bunch of things about returning the filibuster to the way it used to be. That was, of course, part of the polling. And I'm like, sure, maybe, but I don't think that the Democrats talking about this are actually really, really interested in changing it to the old system. They want to just get rid of any influence that any sort of holdout Republicans might have. The non-neocons, that is. And speaking of that, I did see a thing the other day where the neocons were talking about breaking away and making their own party, as they should, because they're not traditional conservatives in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, they come from the left. They infiltrated the Republican Party. This is the history of the neocons because, well, on the left, people were too hippy-dippy anti-war at the time. And these folks thought, well, we can get the right to become the warmongers. Before this time, by the way, folks, if you weren't aware, the right was almost always elected to stop these wars and expansion of government. This is why Eisenhower was brought into office, primarily because we went into the unjustified war with Korea. And it was unjustified because Congress did not vote on it as it would any other war. We don't do that anymore. It was a big controversy at the time. Again, when things were 100 years ago, not quite, but things back in the day, during the 20th century, the early part of, these folks often understood the true constitutional meaning of things. And I always give the example that we had to put alcohol prohibition in the Constitution in order to make it illegal in the United States because everyone understood it. They had the right to do with their own body what they pleased, to including imbibing alcohol. So, hey, Shelley, so yeah, there's that. Anyways, I did talk to this girl for a while, and probably like we had probably like 15, 20 minutes worth of conversation in between, well, at the beginning and in between and after I got done the survey. So that's what you need to do, folks. That's what you need to do. I mean, obviously, she was open minded. She was a political philosophy major, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. A political science major. She was really into philosophy. She told me, maybe I misread what she told me because I don't recall exactly. But I do know she said that she was really into philosophy. She started talking about making arguments. When people, get emotional, they lose the argument immediately. And I would agree that logically that's true. But that is not a reality in our conversations today because people follow their emotions. They always do. They follow their baser instincts. And the emotional part of the brain, folks, is the temper tantrum part of the brain, right? That's the part of the brain that makes you do stupid things and makes kids flip out when they don't have power or control over anything. And it's the part of the brain that the left operates under. The scientific literature on this is pretty clear that our prefrontal cortex, that is the front of our brain that essentially makes us not be so stupid and emotional or impulsive, doesn't develop till we're about 25. Women tend to be less adventurous and dangerous than men, of course. Hey, Sam, thanks for joining. But yeah, the idea is that until you reach that age, you're not a totally stable person. You just aren't. And young children, through morality, can for sure, teens and young adults can for sure, be rational beings and unemotional. But that takes a upbringing from the beginning that emphasizes these things. So again, these were the things we were talking about. And, I told her that the emotional appeals are really what draw people in. Yada, yada, yada. But once again, it was very cool. And that's what you all need to do. You need to just have conversations with people. We could have kept it neutral, but she was open. And of course, I'm very open. And with that, we had a dialogue and I gained a sub. And maybe I will help her navigate the world and all the crazy things that are going on. I even talked about I was a proponent of breakaway societies. So anyways, hey Josh, what's going on, man? And so some of you were Don's chat this morning too. Well, all of you except for Shelly here. And I kind of did want to address some of the things Don was talking about because I don't necessarily disagree with Don. I think it's a lot of times what we get into is we get into crosstalk because of semantics. And it seemed like the overall message, as I was up early enough today to be in the show, or to watch the show live, that is, the message that Don was basically saying is that the left is actually really not a bunch of stupid people. Now, the emotional folks, those are the stupid people. We covered this in that Peterson video. But the people at the top are quite intelligent and they know exactly what they're doing. When we talk about Patrisse Cullors being a trained Marxist, she is trained in subversion, guys. She is trained in Soviet-style active measures. They all are. These are not dumb people. They are highly strategized and organized. And the strategy and organization, of course, we can go back to Saul Alinsky and his tactics. It is always about the emotional appeal. And those that are the intellectia, they are basically trying to just garner power. And the folks on the right, the liberty-minded folks, we don't organize well, which is why Don does the stuff he does, or why I'm doing the stuff that I do, because we do need to organize. We do need to understand this. This is why last week I played to you that clip, that brief clip of Tim Pool going, these people want to suppress free speech, but people on the right or people like me, we have our principles and we're going to stand up for it, blah, 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 blah. And so they're just going to keep winning. And that's exactly that is what happens. There has to be a point where we say, well, if you want to be in a free society, the kind of societies that we want, then you have to go along with the free society rules. And if you do not, then you are exiled from society, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Back in the day, historically, that was a death sentence. So maybe it wasn't a death sentence, but it's not fun. I mean, that's how most people remain Amish, because when they go out on their Rumspringer for a year or two, whatever it is, when they're young children, they get pressure from the family because they will be shunned eventually if they don't come back to the Amish lifestyle. And again, that keeps the Amish for the most part. There are some that go away forever, but they are literally the best example we have, probably, of a successful breakaway society operating within our society. Now, I don't want to go along the route of less technology, but that might be a thing that actually happens here eventually as well. So let's keep all of that in mind. By the way, since Josh is here, I do want to remind everybody this Wednesday on the Justify the Memes, that is our guest, that Josh is here. Josh is a very eloquent speaker, and he is a guy that talks to the legislatures. So I wanted him to come on because he was on Sniper's channel, and I really appreciated his voice, and I thought, well, the more voices or the more power we can give to his voice, the better. And hopefully he can inspire and encourage some of you as well. So in any case, those are just some things, some thoughts. With that, though, I did want to talk about this article that came up, and this is a telling article. And if you look at this article here, Space Force CO, who got holiday call from Trump, fired over comments decrying Marxism in the military. This guy wrote a book. It is the #1 bestseller on Amazon, from what I understand right now. He did all the stuff that you have to do while you're in the military to write a book, including have it go through a review board, which he didn't necessarily have to do, but if he was going to talk about certain military things, it's intelligent to do such a thing because, man, they will go after you. They will hammer you. But, he got essentially demoted because of his views on Marxism. Now, I'm going to read the article here. We're going to go over it real quick, but I do want you to see some of the things if you Google this. So I put Space Force CO fired. Of course, that comes up. Then the CNN article, Space Force commander fired after comments made on conservative podcast. And this all has to do with the purging, guys. And then here from the Independent, Space Force lieutenant fired for claiming U.S. military are Marxists. Like, you can't make that claim. And we could get into the idea that but the military is not supposed to be politicized. Do you vote in the military? Because I did. When I was in the military, I voted. That's a political act, folks. Now, you can't be in uniform saying that the whole of the military or my unit or whatever, this is what we believe in, blah, blah, blah. That's something different. But this idea that people in the military cannot be political is absurd. Of course they are. And the mindset, though, is that they are to be a neutral arbiter, and that is not happening anymore. Remember the 500 some odd people that I mentioned last week that endorsed Biden? The 500 some odd people? Well, not quite 500. It was 482, I think. And then 124 or something just said Biden has lost his mind and he's a danger to America. And we're seeing the same thing over in France, of course. Of course, the French, at the same time, they love their civil wars. They've been doing it all the time for the last 300 years, 200 some odd years. Real quick, I'll read the comment here from Josh. Have you checked out the Anabaptist? Yeah, I know about Anabaptist. The Amish basically come out of that movement. I would consider myself an Anabaptist of sorts. I really like the Quakers. That's part of the Anabaptist movement. But they're way too disorganized because they don't try to put any sort of authority upon each other. It says they're pacifists. Also, they have separate communities just north of me. But since they believe in avoiding politics, it's not for me. Yeah, I actually do believe in avoiding politics, generally speaking. However, like, here's the thing. Obviously, there are levels to this. And if you are a Christian pacifist, right, or if you're a Christian, I'm practically a Christian anarchist, guys. I'm not really, because I know that anarchism's a utopian thing. But, if that were the case, then I would be fine, if everyone thought that way. But it's when you start getting into, well, I'm going to have to do certain things, like order certain people to be executed, or you have to use force, and that doesn't align with your beliefs. Now, if you're a Christian that believes it's okay to use force, That's fine. I don't agree with that. I think that that is antithetical to the teachings of Christ, but I do understand that people believe that way. I would say that came later with Augustine. Something I actually want to talk about here this week, if I get around to it, in our Manichaean politics. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later on. In any case, if we go down through here, we see Space Force Lieutenant fired. The air and space, yeah, no one cares about that. We have the airstrikes. Here from the Daily Beast. Space Force Commander with pin shot for conspiracy theories. Filed blah, 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 blah. In the article here, they just used the original military.com article, and this article doesn't talk anything about conspiracies. And what conspiracy? What are you talking about? Like, or conspiracy. They're using that derogatory, right? What are you talking about? This is obviously conspiratorial. There are Marxists going, yeah, we're trying to burn everything down and take control. We want to get rid of your police, and we're getting political misfits out of our military, like people who posted Gadsden flags on their Facebook and stuff. Like they're like, you can't guard the president now. That should tell you something, and what the administration, what the White House and the DOJ and everyone else there are thinking, and how they are seeing this, that their own forces are a threat to them. This is a big deal, folks. So Samus says, you can't be in uniform using it as part of your argument against a political show host on Fox, for example. Right, right. Yes, and that's the thing, is there have been many of these folks, and as long as I always say, as you guys know, as long as the opinions are correct, that is, you have the left-wing opinion, you can say whatever you want and do whatever you want. There are no rules for you, and that's true. That's just reality. And that shows you who does have power and who does have influence and how well organized they actually are. Now, again, I don't think it's the majority of the population, though. I think it's the elites and the ivory towers, and I think it's a bunch of stupid people who are basically freaks, for lack of a better term. They're lost individuals. They don't know anything, and they get caught up in these mantras like some sort of cultish religion. In any case, let's read the article, if my mouse wants to work. Let me check chat real quick and elsewhere, just to make sure that I don't have anybody asking me questions or anything. All right, DLive looks clear. And nothing over on entropy. By the way, guys, I'm sure most of you know this, but if at all you do feel inclined to donate, you can do that through Entropy DLive, or you can go to the Subscribe Star. Now, what's more important for me is growth. Growth of the channel, growth of the community. So if you can shout this out somewhere, if you know people that watch, similar content, then post it up somewhere. I don't really do a lot of that because I'm always concerned with other things. So I got up, got the stuff for the stream kind of together. I ate a little bit. I checked out some news. I had to mow the lawn, and then I have to go to a birthing class later. So I don't always have time, or I'm thinking about doing these things. And so you guys help this channel grow and help me out if you think what I do is good, if I'm doing a good job with it. So Josh, what else did you say here? So we must really push out that critical theory and social Marxist doctrine. They're just using race and gender instead of class for a redistribution agenda. That's right, absolutely. And that's all from, of course, the guys from the French school, the French intellectuals, Derrida and Foucault and all them, and the postmodernists, and also from the Frankfurt School from years before that. Right. They have to find something, because they know the world is wrong, and they're really good people, so they know all the answers to fix it. And really what they think is, well, yeah, the world is wrong because there's injustice and these poor people and this, that, and the other thing, but I know how to fix it. No one else has ever done it throughout history. If you just give me the right amount of power and authority, I promise you. Now, I might have to kill, a couple million people in the process, but eventually we'll get there, and there will be just a grand utopia awaiting. That, of course, is utter nonsense. So, from May 15th, 2021, a commander of U.S. Special Forces unit tasked with detecting ballistic missiles launched has been fired for comments made during a podcast promoting his new book. The claims Marxist ideologies are becoming prevalent in the United States military. Of course they are. We know this. We know that. I talked to military people who are still in, who just gotten out. It's around, guys. It's bad. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps, some of you guys who were Marines, like, you couldn't walk around with your hands in your pocket. I certainly don't understand how the cell phone thing's going around. Now, you could do that out in the field, but when you were in garrison, you were not to have your hands in your pocket, stuff like that, right? So there is a certain amount of discipline in your behavior, and there's always someone to check that behavior as well. I don't know if the military is working that way anymore. It's lowering its standards, even though the women actually are testing okay for the new PT test. From what I understand, they're still light years below the men. Duh. But you create a lot of problems when you get a casual military. In fact, the Marine Corps went through this back in the 80s, and they were dressing up as in uniform all the time and not wearing their utilities, their camis, and they came in, and I can't remember who the sergeant, or not the sergeant major, who the commandant was that changed that. Was it Krulak? I can't recall. It's been so long. But he changed these things, and he's like, yeah, we spent too much time doing this. And then while I was in, they also, at the time, they're like, we are, we're spending too much time spit shining boots and ironing our camis to make them look polished, and it's like this doesn't provide anything to combat. So that mindset was changing a lot, going back to a more militaristic discipline. But today, not so much. Not so much. Not from what I understand. Let's see here. Might have to kill a few kulaks to realize the communist dream, but that's a small price to pay for heaven on earth, right? Chesty said you could you could checkmate, Sergeant Major. There you go. All right. So this decision was based on public comments made by Lieutenant Lohmeyer in a recent podcast. A Space Force spokesperson said in an email, Lieutenant General Whiting had initiated the command directive investigation on whether these comments constituted prohibited partisan political activities. His temporary assignment in the wake of his removal was not immediately clear. Earlier this month, he was a former instructor, it says, of fighter pilots, and transferred into special forces. Self-published a book entitled "Irresistible Revolution: Marxism's Goal of Conquest and Unmaking of the American Military." So this guy was telling the truth, and he got fired for it. Imagine that. Irresistible Revolution is a timely and bold contribution from an active duty Space Force lieutenant colonel who sees the impact of new Marxist agenda at the ground level within our armed forces. A description of the book reads, Lohmer sat down last week with L. Todd Wood of the podcast Information Operation, hosted by Creative Destruction or CD Media, to promote the book. He spoke about U.S. institutions, including universities, media, and federal agencies, including the military, that he said are increasingly adopting leftist practices. These practices, such as diversity and inclusion training, are the systemic cause for the divisive climate across America today, he said. Tell me something I don't know, right? Like, this is all obvious to anybody who has eyes to see and ears to hear. And the only people this isn't obvious to is the left, and I'm pretty sure it's obvious to most of them who are running the show. They see this and they understand it, but they gaslight. And again, that's part of the Saul Alinsky tactics. It says, from his perspective as a commander, Lohmer, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but said that he didn't seek to criticize any particular senior leader or publicly identify troops within the book. Rather, he said he focused on the policies service members now have to adhere to align with certain agendas that are now affecting our culture. Regarding Defense Secretary Lloyd Aston, he said, "I don't demonize the man, but I want to make it clear to both him and every service member, this diversity and inclusion agenda will divide us. It will not unify us. Of course, it's meant to divide us. That's the purpose of it. That's what the whole that racism and all those things, guys. However way you're applying it is a tool of division. Political bigotry is a tool of division, and it's to make the population weak and demoralized. That's what all of this is. And I've been thinking to get into some of the communist active measures here on stream, and maybe I'll do that on Friday or something like that. I've also been looking at some other stuff. Like I haven't busted this out in a while, but I have a couple copies of this. But this is Aristotle's on politics and the Athenian constitution, and just maybe going through some of these things that are, over 2,000 years old, but important because it is largely how those philosophies, how we have structured the Western world. So Josh Ham says, they keep calling him lieutenant. He's a lieutenant colonel and the troop commander, not some wet by the ears boot. Yeah, no joke, man. Yeah, he's probably been in for 20 some odd years to be lieutenant colonel. So, yeah. Let's see here. It says Austin on February 5th ordered all military service to observe one-day stand-down on extremism in the ranks. As part of his stand-down, Lomer said he was given the booklet that cited the January 6th riot at the Capitol as an example of extremism, but did not mention the civil disobedience and destruction of property that took place following the death of George Floyd, a black man, at the hands of, at the hands of a mixed-race police force, is what it should say. He also took issues with the Pentagon spokesperson seeming to allude to Press Secretary John Kirby. Lomer claimed Kirby said there are too many white pilots amid an ever-increasing pilot shortage. That makes sense to me. Generally speaking, guys, in the military, black folks do not get into the combat side of things. There are some. I was in the 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, an infantry unit. I was in Echo Company, and we had guys there that were black dudes, but most of them, they're like motor T folks. They don't want to be in combat or go in the field. That's generally the thing. So I wouldn't expect there to be a lot of non-white pilots unless they were Asian. That would be my guess. If you want to provide that kind of messaging, you are already struggling pilot force. You can already expect to see further retention problems, he said. This is good, though. This is good if they're going to push this. I've said it before, and our military will become weak. It'll be bad for foreign invaders or influence, but it's good as far as, basically the balkanization is bound to happen here unless we do a complete overhaul of the federal government. I don't see that happening, folks. I just don't. In a statement Friday, Kirby denied ever saying such a thing about a surplus of white pilots and pointed to Austin's comments made last week during his first press conference about the importance of increasing diversity programs. This department has an open door to any qualified American who wants to serve, the defense secretary said May 6. Diversity throughout the force is a source of strength. He can't afford to deprive ourselves of the talents and the voices of the full range of the nation that we defend. Lomer told military.com he had consulted with his base public affairs and legal counsel about his plans to publish a book and its contents, meaning the military approved this. And for those of you who have never been in the military is all-encompassing in your life, if you want it to be. I didn't use a lot of the services while I was in, but, families, women's groups, all kinds of stuff are a thing in the military, and people basically support and hold each other up for the purpose of, these families do, for the purpose of the troops. Of course, there's also a lot of really bad women, bad relationships, cheating, all kinds of other crazy things there. But as far as the good people, Josh says he was a fighter pilot, so he probably actually one of the few zombies who has been in combat, engaged in combat. Right. I was apprised of the opinion to have my book reviewed at the Pentagon's pre-publication and security review prior to release. It was also informed that I was not required, Lomer said in an email. My intent never has been to engage in partisan politics. I've written a book about a particular political ideology, Marxism, in the hopes that our Defense Department might return to being politically nonpartisan in the future, as it has honorably done throughout history, he said. The book is available on Amazon, on Lomer's website, and Barnes & Noble. And then it says, prior to transferring to space operations specifically, space-based missile warning, Lomer spent over 14 years in the Air Force. There you go. And then it talks about his history there. I'm not going to get into all that. Doesn't matter. This is important. This is a very important thing, though. They also have, Josh, I just caught, yeah, he's a lieutenant colonel, but they have him with captain bars on, so that's obviously not a recent photograph. But, you know, these things are utterly important because it is it's basically it's a canary in the coal mine. Again, most of us are already in this mindset. We already understand what is unfolding, what's happening. We know that these things build up over a long period of time. The American Revolution was a long period build up before the actual war broke out. The war against Northern aggression, that happened with a 50-year lead up that many people knew would happen. In fact, de Tocqueville predicted it, that the war would happen very specifically. There was always a problem between how people lived in the South and people lived in the North. And there was always a tension there within the Congress and the Senate about laws. And if you read into the history of these things, you'll see that the people in the North, the Democrats in the North largely, were working with the Democrats in the South. And so it was party lines, exactly the same, tribal lines, I should say. And the people in the North who were not necessarily Republicans, because that party basically came about right before the Civil War, but who were Whigs or whatever else they might be, they were always looking at the Southern laws on tariffs and stuff, where they had lower tariffs, but they produced more. So again, these economic imbalances, these different tensions between the states, which we talked about the other week in Washington's farewell address, that's in part what caused this. And we're seeing the same thing now. And I'm not sure how we'll balkanize. I think that it'll go kind of regional. I think there might be some states that join alliances. But I think the first thing is that the states, this seems pretty obvious, are just going to stop paying attention to the feds. Some states will. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Either way, I don't want to be a part of it. I just want to go live off in the woods. I want to go be in the mountains. I want my communities. Let's see. Not zombie, Zoomy or Zoomy. Okay, yeah. What's a surefire way to make sure that citizens understand the military doesn't have a radical ideological bent? Simply shut down and fire anyone who does. Right. Yeah, exactly, Josh. Get rid of the guy who's saying, "Hey, there's dissent here." No, as far as I know, he's still in the military, right? That there'd be a whole process of NJP and all this other stuff, and he did nothing wrong. So, that is exactly what it is. Let's see here, guys. Just going to check up on the chats real quick. All right. So I titled this The Vampire Economy because we are still reading Bastiat and we are still going to be watching Heaven on Earth. But I wanted to get into the Vampire Economy by Günter Riemann. So you all, probably not having read this, have a little bit more of an understanding of how business worked under Nazi Germany. So before that, I have a series of tweets here from a few years back that kind of talk about the history of how the Weimar Republic died and Nazi Germany was created. So we're going to look at that real quick. And hopefully you all can see this well. I guess that's good enough. So, from U.S. Rebel at U.S. Rising in 1776, he says, in America, the public is given zero information on the Weimar Republic. I would not agree with that, but I'm a fan of the Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, so I understand a little bit. The period the period in Germany post World War One that led to the rise of the National Socialists in 1933. It is deliberate. The period holds too many secrets to the modern world. This thread will expose those secrets. And yes, this if you understood your history and that the socialist communists were operating in Germany, and that the Nazi Party was just an outgrowth of that, more or less, um, you're going to not understand. And the reason why that's done is because commies got to have an enemy to point to. And instead of admitting the Holodomor, instead of admitting the Great Famine in China, instead of admitting those kind of things, they obfuscate them, of course, and then go, Nazi, Nazi, everyone's a Nazi. And when they start talking to you about capitalism and Nazis were capitalists, they could not be further from the truth, guys. We do operate very much like the Weimar Republic in the United States here. We have a more free market, I would say, from what I understand. I didn't live back then, but I do know a lot of the things they did, and I know that because of the vampire economy. And Riemann, by the way, was a communist. So we'll get there. First, a tweet on what Germany was pre-Weimar. As the Holy Roman Empire ended, Germans united throughout the 18th and 19th centuries under strong leadership, loyal monarchs, and good governance. Germany was a bustling European center for industry, military, culture, and Christianity. Yeah, and this was something I talked to my wife about last week because she didn't know. I said, honey, you don't know, like, that Germany is very influential to the Western world historically. And the Holy Roman Empire was moved there. The Pope used to be in Germany for a period of time. So, a lot of people don't understand anything about, European history. Even our intellectua today, they think about things going back to the Enlightenment. Peterson talks about this because other guys like, I can't think of the guy who wrote the Blank Slate book and a bunch of other stuff. Steven Pinker. I like Pinker's work, but he's obviously a bit of a lefty, and it's like they start talking about things like it just started at the Enlightenment, and it's like, no, man, we have all these other thousands of years before where we tried these things out and they didn't work. The key to the Enlightenment was this: that Christianity was being embraced, and that classical liberal level where people were wanting, including the rulers, to allow people to be free. We are kind of at a height of civilization to some degree. Maybe not totally, but philosophically, yeah. And the big differences between then and today, of course, is the degeneracy, but the technology as well. And the technology enhances the capacity for degeneracy. And it also, I believe, is making us less and less of ourselves, of our species, of our nature. Kind of briefly talked about this with Aiden yesterday in transhumanism. A lot of this will be addressed in the book I'm writing as well, guys. I hope I get as much attention as the lieutenant colonel there did with his book. Let's see. Sam says their best evidence of that is Hitler saying he hated Marxists because socialists didn't seem to realize the ideology predates Marx. Yeah, he says very specifically, I believe in Mein Kampf, that he does not like Jewish Bolshevism nor Jewish capitalism. Like, it's kind of a, it's kind of one of those things that's really blatant if you just read a little bit about the history instead of reading about what professors or Marxists have to say about it, which is an unusual thing. And I know how the political science world works. Like most sciences, they try to overcomplicate things, and so you have these guys go, well, there's the authoritarianism, and then there's the economic capacity of this, and then there's the traditional, and all these things have to be blended together. Or you know what? Just go read the Doctrines of Fascism by the people who invented the idea. Just go read that because it explains to you what they envisioned. It's pretty simple. Then World War I happened, largely orchestrated by corporate global interest. It was a a disaster for Germany. Germany had a string of victories and sought a peaceful truce, but global financiers behind the war would lose money and their agenda, so they brought in America in 1917. So this is Bernard Brock, who's born to a Jewish family, blah, 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 blah. And this obviously has the money ties. And then presidential advisor, First World War, under Wilson. Isn't that funny? 181 million dead, 7 million casualties. Ooh, brutal. War is brutal, folks. How the war ended is critical to setting the stage for Weimar. Also recall that the Bushes were involved in this kind of stuff, and other folks as well. The German war effort collapsed in 1918 when communists led strikes in munitions factories and launched a violent revolution in Germany. The monarchy fell, the war ended with no truce, and liberal elites created Weimar. And here it says the German Revolution, or November Revolution, was a civil conflict in the German Empire at the end of the First World War that resulted in the replacement of the German federal constitutional monarchy with a democratic parliamentary republic that became known as the Weimar Republic. The revolutionary period lasted from November 1918 until the adoption of August 1919 of the Weimar Constitution. That's pretty quick, isn't it? Pretty quick turnaround for a new government. Abduction of the Kaiser, revolution in Germany. Or abdication, I should say. Abdication. Before I get into who conspired this new liberal elite in Germany, first a look at who was behind the revolution. And it gives you a bunch of names. Rosa Luxemburg, I guess. There's that weird German-French, crossover with names. Like the German word for orange is 100% French. It's orange. I do speak German, really rusty, but it must make me one of those bad guys. It says Luxembourg was born on the 5th of March, 1871. Blah 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 blah. To a Polish Jewish family, and you get where this guy's going with all this. So again, I don't think that anybody here is. I'm not trying to lionize anybody or say that they were good people for the things that they did, but the perceptions is what this guy is trying to build here. The perceptions of who was running the country, and of course we see the same thing here, right, in the United States, with the media and the bankers and whatever else. Now, I don't think that the certain ethnic group is the ones ruling the world. I don't think that's how that works, but. I'm not saying they don't have influence. I mean, no one's going to deny that. So, in any case, at the Treaty of Versailles, a crippled Germany was carved up by the global elite with no opposition from the new Weimar leaders. Who were the key representatives letting this happen? Paul Hirsch, the Prime Minister of Persia, and Otto Landsberg. And they were, and once again, guys, this is just what he's saying. Now, again, I'm sure that these things are a little bit more complicated than this, but this is a thing. There's a reason why they. Why did this stop? It's weird. It's a reason why they were not seen well by a lot of people, and they were an easy scapegoat. And if you study this, the propaganda of the day, you'll find that it was a pretty common sentiment amongst the German people. So there you go. The term Weimar comes from the city of Weimar, where this new liberal democratic government was first assembled. In the unnatural, fragmented Germany, a new constitution was foisted on the people. Who wrote it? Hugo Preuss. Who is he? He's that guy. So you can see with the rapid inflation that happens and these people coming in and changing the government and doing whatever, why Hitler felt like they were destroying Germany. Again, I'm not saying that he was justified in doing anything that he did, per se. I mean, the man was a bit of a megalomaniac, right? He made a treaty with Russia. Russia, which is, by the way, folks, kind of like they're basically cousins to Germany. They have been for centuries. The Slavic peoples are, just west of there, or sorry, east of there. So they've had a lot of interactions over the years. And when Stalin and Hitler made their treaties, he betrayed him because of Hitler's own greed. And what he wanted was he wanted the Germans to basically reestablish their old kingdom, hence the word Third Reich. So again, we go through here. For nearly a decade, this government has overwhelmingly run by left liberal, non-German influences. And again, it's the same tale. For the 70, 80 years leading up to Weimar, left liberal socialists had been wreaking havoc across Germany, preventing the people from knowing real peace. Who were these early leaders? And again, the early years of Weimar were filled with turmoil and suffering. The people weren't organized. The extreme left launched frequent rebellions. There were food shortages and poverty. France invaded Germany in 1923 and 25 to collect reparations. It was an absolute mess. And it was. Austria did a little bit better because the Austrian government at the time was had a great economist working for them named Ludwig von Mises. So he helped to curb the inflation in Austria that Germany did not do. The intellectual government was often embroiled in scandal, with one group at the center, and involved Jewish crime rings scamming Germany with political corruption, bribery, fraud, and war profiting, etc. Accompanying the Weimar broken political world was an equally sick and degenerate culture and society. Everything was tolerated. Berlin became the sin capital of the world. Many poor, desperate Germans sold themselves like cheap goods. No sexual perversion was off the table. At the center of the sexual revolution was Magnus Hirschfeld. He created the Institute of Sexual Research, created in Berlin, collaborating all kinds of sexual fetishes, including trans surgery research. Sound familiar? And I think what you're going to see here is that these folks were wealthy and they were influencing the society. The society wasn't doing well. The average people weren't doing well, so a strongman came up. We keep warning about the strongman. Many of us, I know Josh has mentioned the strongman and mentioned it on Sniper Stream, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want that. You don't know the consequences of that. For you, for your children, for your grandchildren, you don't have any clue what that will cause. So this is why I'm an advocate of, again, breaking away, creating our own little communities and just staying out of it, because no matter what, guys, at some point or another, you're going to be sucked into, or you're part of the game if you're not doing this, is what I'm going to say. You're stuck in the game. You're going to be in their system. If you're not trying to figure out how to survive on your own, have whatever tools and commodities, if you're not looking at local government, what happens is the strongman comes in, rallies everyone together. This was not Donald Trump, by the way. Obviously, if Donald Trump was a strongman, he would still be in office right now. 100%. This is not Joe Biden either. But they will come soon. And I keep saying, we have one administration away before things get really bad here. I mean, I'm really hoping that I'm wrong about that. And I'm hoping that you all have enough time to get out of the cities, to do these things for your own, to make life a little harder for the feds or whomever else that wants to radically change our nation and our beliefs. This is, again, something that can be related to what Don was saying this morning about us not being smart. Well, I'm saying we can be smart. And Don also said something about the morality of things. I don't remember the whole thing because I was doing multiple things at the time. But look, guys, liberty will never exist, in my opinion, without morality, because as soon as you lose morality, you degenerate into a society that props up a strong man, A strong man is always going to be some sort of tyrant. We can look at this, and again, I'm no expert in this, but we can look at Franco's Spain. Franco did a lot of great things for Spain, but he did it with a very, very heavy hand. And I don't like the fact that he nationalized a lot of things, but it's whatever. But Spain was doing pretty well under him. But there was only one political party, and any dissenters, they were ousted. They were gone. It was pretty not fun. Wasn't a good time, guys. So, anyways, the German film industry was also filled with degenerate themes. Some of the many producers, you guys are catching the drift here. The pornography business also became extremely popular and lucrative during Weimar, often taking advantage of German women looking for work. And again, this is a reflection, right, of OnlyFans today. Like every one of their mothers on OnlyFans. It's ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. Maybe not every one of their mother, but there's a lot of people, just regular women. There was a girl I was interested in some years ago. It's on. She's an attractive girl. Wasn't really that interested in her, but never got out with her. But anyways, I had her Instagram, and I see that she's doing this OnlyFans thing, and it's like, and then she'll put up comments about God and stuff, and I'm like, God don't have nothing to do with your OnlyFans, honey. That's all on you. And I'm telling you right now, he ain't your friend. Art in Weimar experienced a similar descent into meaningless, perverse, and works that inspired nothing but sadness and discord. Does this look familiar? This is industrialized postmodernist style art, and the postmodern era technically wasn't here yet. Even promoted photographers like Erwin Blumfeld sought to inject subversive anti-German themes into their work. The German media, much like today, collaborate with the political and social elite, ignoring the plights of everyday Germans and a couple degradations of German culture who ran the major newspapers. Weimar hit rock bottom when the U.S. stock market crashed and the global Great Depression followed. The degenerate society was wholly unprepared. Unemployed, starvation, disease, currency collapse, stacks of German money were often worthless. The Weimar nightmare was complete. This is what is coming around the corner. And when this happens, the strongman comes. Here, we will be under a Chinese-style government, is what I would assume. Maybe not. But this is the thing. And then we'll get a president, and then they'll do away with the Constitution or whatever it is, and they'll go, I'm president for life. This is how almost all these revolutions work, guys. This is how these people who want to do this purposefully do it. That's how they get it done. They know. They figured this out way back then in the 1800s, and they've been doing it ever since. And here in the United States, we are outsourcing everything so we can be completely weak and feeble and inflating our money. And then you're going to go, government, give me, because you didn't prepare, because you didn't know how to, you didn't learn any skills. You didn't get off the grid like I told you to. You didn't do any of those things. And then you're stuck in it, and you're going to have to accept it. You're just going to have to accept it. Well, hey, Holly, thanks for showing up. Josh says, I'm confident the financial and social collapse coming soon will cause people to clamor for someone to make the trains run on time. Absolutely. And that's why I'm covering this. Just check other chat real quick. You know, and I like covering this because we always talk about, everyone knows about how the commies came out, right? Except for the commies, the commies that are in the streets marching, right? They're dumb. They don't know what they're doing. But everyone else, everyone who's aware, everyone at the top of communism, and everyone who's pushing communism, that is, advocates, and every one of us who are aware knows how this works. It isn't any different. They do the same stuff, guys. And when people are desperate, they want someone to stand up and give them their give them their bread, give them their cake. People enjoy handouts because it's easy. It's easy, and they don't realize the nature of the world. Now, I would say, um, obviously, you know my stance on that. This is the kingdom of Satan versus, if you're in the kingdom of God or not. I consider myself a sojourner through this world, through this nation now. This goes back to Josh and the political thing, by the way, as well, is that I'm not really a citizen of the United States. Now, I know the government thinks I am. I do have a social security number. I do pay my taxes. But the early Christians didn't think this way. They thought about passers through in this journey of life on earth until the kingdom of God was here. And it is here as far as its people. But most people aren't within that kingdom. In any case, it says, throughout Weimar Europe learned of the horrors of Bolshevism to the east. Yet communists paraded openly in Weimar with official parties and the government. And then came on the brown shirts and the fights and whatever else. And the reason why I don't think that, I don't think Nazism or fascism is in any way, shape, or form right-wing in the classical liberal perspective. That is, the where we came from in the United States, right? It is nothing of the sorts. The other thing is the left is always the revolution. It's always the revolution, guys. Once the revolution's over, then you want to establish things. We did that here, and we established classical liberalism. What we've done since then is revolutionized our system over and over again. First, we had a great big war, and then after that war, we kind of repaired the nation, and the Republicans would not allow the Democrats to gain any power anywhere. And then eventually, you get a guy like Teddy Roosevelt come along, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I like nationalizing all these things and progressive policies and advancing the world and blah, 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 blah." And then you get Woodrow Wilson coming in and getting the Federal Reserve Bank and income tax and whatever else, getting us involved in the First World War because he wanted a League of Nations. He wanted a one world government. And then finally, of course, FDR putting that nail in the coffin, as I often say. Those things happen because Americans weren't diligent. They allowed their government to get powerful. They're like, well, you know what? I agree with these concessions. I agree with that concession. Remember when I read to you last week? I think last Friday, right? Davy Crockett and his speech on the House floor about appropriating money to a war widow. Well, she wasn't even a war widow. Her husband had just served in the military for a long period of time. And he said no. And I continued to read and show you the story of why he said no, because of a farmer confronting him. That's the kind of stuff that we need. That's the kind of stuff we need in our government. That's why someone like Josh is so very, very, very important. Let's see. Aragon, the angriest boy. Economic hardship, communists running amok, weak, effective leadership. Wait, I've seen this one before. Exactly. So let's play a little Heaven on Earth. It's just a short clip because I'm just doing it by the little sections. And then I'll get into the vampire economy, and we'll finish up with some Bastiat, I think. Because I can't really stream past 5 today, guys. Like, I might be able to go a little over, but... Let's see. We should be about right here.
They took into public ownership coal, rail, steel, road haulage, gas, and electricity. They created a national health service, free medical care for everybody. They instituted a system of pension by rights at a level which made old age dignified, if not prosperous.
And almost bankrupt the nation by the 1970s and whatever else. But it was so humane to do all these things for folks.
I mean, they had a pretty busy 6 years. I don't think any government's ever been as busy.
As the Attlee government put socialism to work rebuilding Britain, the idea was being used for building a nation in another part of the world. A war-torn Britain could no longer support its far-flung empire. And one by one, colonies and territories began to fall away from the mother country. 1948 brought the creation of the new state of Israel, from part of the British trusteeship of Palestine. For decades, the Zionist movement had been struggling to create a Jewish state by settling Jews in Palestine. Many of these settlements were collective socialist villages called kibbutzim.
The kibbutz saw itself as socialist, but also at the same time as the expression of a national revolution. And they saw themselves as, in fact, the future Jewish society of this land.
Kibbutz Genasar is nestled along the western banks of the Sea of Galilee. It was founded in 1937 by a group of young socialists, and it soon became the base of the Palmach, the elite commando wing of the Jewish Defense Forces.
We wanted to influence the country. That was the idea. We wanted to influence the country and stand for equality and all the things we believed in.
Moshe Abbas came to Kibbutz Genasar in 1940, when he was just 20 years old. In those early years, the kibbutz did not have tents, so he slept on the grass. But for Moshe and others, the sacrifice was worth it.
The spirit of the kibbutz, what gave us the strength to live that way. Someone asked once if I was religious, and I told them I have one religion, and that is the kibbutz. It covers everything you need.
The War of Independence came in 1948, and the kibbutz-based Palmach forces spearheaded the Jewish victory. With the support of the new state of Israel, Genasar began to flourish. It built permanent homes, ran a profitable fishing operation, raised chickens, dairy cattle, and honeybees, and grew crops like bananas, mangoes, olives, and tomatoes.
I had never worked in farming or agriculture before, and I had never had to go by the decisions of a collective. But because what I'd been through in the past, all this wasn't hard for me.
Isaac Rotem settled at Genasar in 1948. He is one of the hundreds of thousands of European Jews who came to Israel in the wake of the Holocaust.
I came through all the camps. Camps in Auschwitz, camps in Cyprus, and suddenly I felt like I was part of one big family. Suddenly you feel there is someone who cares about you, someone keeping up with you.
The kibbutz was socialism on a human scale. Instead of the government owning everything, as it did in the Soviet Union, and to a lesser extent in Britain, the community owned everything and made all decisions collectively.
The motto of the kibbutz movement was borrowed from Marx, which was, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. There was no private property. Everything was shared in common, but it was all done in democratic fashion, that is, in group meetings or committee meetings where people could present their needs, and the kibbutz would democratically decide what to do to make sure that that person had his or her needs met.
You did not need any salary because you got food in the dining room, you got clothes in the special store. At the very beginning, at least, you had no private clothes. The storehouse distributed every week clothes to the members. You could receive a shirt that another member had the week before.
Like many,
I want you guys to understand this. The kibbutz is probably one of the best examples of how socialism works. Everyone's poor, everyone's sharing everything because they're poor, and eventually what happens is everyone leaves because they become rich. They become rich as they have more free market type exchange, and as they gain wealth, that is material goods. So you'll see this very clearly. It should also be noted that Israel is still considered a socialist nation. It says it right on its charter. So, or constitution or whatever it is, but you can read it in any case. Go check that out if you want. I don't think that Israel would sustain itself if it was not for the billions of dollars in foreign aid from the United States that they receive every year. And the Zionists will try to guilt you into believing that that Israel needs that, or they'll be destroyed by, all of the Muslims around them. And maybe, but I doubt it. I really doubt it. The IDF is a terrible, and I mean terrible not as in bad. I mean like terrible as in like they are efficient as far as a fighting force. Now, everyone has to serve in Israel as well, but not everyone, of course, is like they serve on duty. They have different jobs like any military branch. I unfortunately never got to train with the IDF, but I know a lot of Marines that did, because when I was over in that area, we were at war, so you don't get to have those training trips. But I mean, they're very impressive from what I understand. Yeah, and there were a few things here. I sort of was addressing in the chat about helping people out because Holly said something. So one of the things that the scriptures talk about, I'd like to bring up a lot, is the idea of ejecting people from our society, not because we want them to suffer, but because we want them to learn. See, in 1 Corinthians, there was a man who was sleeping with his father's wife, or married her, or whatever. I don't recall. A strange thing. Either they were divorced or his father passed away, but it was odd, even in Roman culture of the day. And Paul gives a chiding to the church for not correcting this man. And then he chides the church for wanting to take people within the church to public court. He said that those matters should be settled here in church, here amongst the assembly, the ecclesia. He said that it is better if one goes and sins, come to him and correct him. And if he doesn't, then come to him with a few more people. And if he doesn't correct a third time, then let him go, so that he may burn with Satan for his salvation. The wording, something like that. But the point is that, yes, he is going to follow the dark path and the dark way, and that will eventually bring him back to God. That hopefully, by letting them go to their own contrivances, that these folks who aren't doing what's right, like not providing, not working, not doing whatever, that they'll change. And often they won't. I mean, I'm sure we all know drunks, like serious hardcore drunks. They don't almost ever change. People don't generally change. It's just not the way it is, guys. People can, but they have to be willing and wanting to do so in their own lives. And that usually never happens until someone's at a very, very low point. Now, there are some people who I absolutely believe cannot be taken care of or cannot do for themselves in society. That's rather obvious. In the Bible, it talks about cripples and orphans and widows specifically. Those are the people that you should help out. Those are the people you should donate to, take care of. In our world today, it's a little bit different given the station and power of women. But also, it's different in that we recognize the people who are mentally deficient and whatever else. But we should still try to empower them as much as possible and not have them rely on us. I get that, again, there's a balance between the individual and the social, because the socialists only see the social. And that's not good. That's not good at all. That's a hive mind. We can't do that. And being individualistic will, I mean, frankly, guys, you'll probably end up being dead after a while, because if you're going to live off on your own, there's a lot of work to be done all by yourself. So try to think about that and understand that we do need each other, and we're all going to have different skill sets, different abilities, and we do the best that we can with what we have. But without that morality, without that fundamental foundation, understanding that yes, we have to do these things, and sometimes we have to go, well, it's your life. You got to go live it. We have to do that. We become so altruistic in our society that we don't let people learn from their own mistakes. We coddle them and allow them to be hedonistic libertines, to do whatever they want. They can just do anything, and there is never a consequence to their action. And that's becoming increasingly so if you have the proper, that is, the left-wing politics. Anyways, play the rest of this.
Other communal experiments, including Robert Owen's New Harmony, the kibbutz even tried to reshape family life. There would be new roles for husbands and wives, and parents and children.
Half the kibbutz members are women, and the idea was that they would be liberated from, not childbearing, of course, that's impossible, but liberated from bringing up their children, liberated from laundry, liberated from cooking, liberated from all the cares that women normally have. So they decided very early on that it was the collective's responsibility to raise the children. The children belong to all of us, and we are all responsible for looking after them. They wouldn't be under the tyranny of a bourgeois mother and father. They would be free members of the children's society.
Again, folks, this is literally how basic hunter-gatherer tribal societies operate. This is what they want. They don't realize that. Most of them aren't smart enough to realize that, but it's what they want.
Living with their own age group.
There was a notion of Ben Kibbutz, the son of the kibbutz or the daughter of the kibbutz. In some kibbutzim, you even had that when a child was born, the General Assembly met and decided what will be his name of the child. how will he be called?
Ginosar's membership would eventually swell to nearly 400 adults. The kibbutz movement would grow to include 270 kibbutzim, with some 130,000 members, about 5% of Israel's population, and play a leading role in the life of the new state.
They marked out the border to start with, very much so, in the north, in the west, in the south, everywhere. Where there were kibbutzim, there was Israel. And they provided a major part of the agriculture. As time went on, they also produced a large amount of the industrial output. They contributed out of all proportion politically. The first two prime ministers were kibbutz members. The first cabinet of Israel, I think nearly half were kibbutz members. Army commanders, initially all the army and military commanders, these were kibbutz members. And I would go as far as to say that without the kibbutz, there wouldn't have been a state of Israel.
And here's the thing too, guys. They're all Jewish. I don't know how religious they were, but there is a common history and ancestry there. And whether you're a secular Jew or a religious Jew, you know, you've been taught your entire life that you are God's chosen people and you've been persecuted. The Bible says that they would be persecuted. The Bible says very specifically, God said, I can't remember where it's at. One of the prophets, speaking with the voice of God, said that I will make you a byword amongst the nations. Again, these are proofs in my mind of the reality of Christ and God the Father and all of that. But aside from that, most Christians aren't even aware of that. Or if they are, then they want to push this idea of Zionism because they want a third temple, which I don't think is actually talked about in the Bible, but that's a whole nother conversation we can have. Or if there is a third temple that we're talking about, it is the being of a man, and that the Holy Spirit rests inside of you. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. This idea of having these kind of socialistic groups is easier when you have all these people that have these things in common, versus if we look at like the Chaz or the Chomp, whatever you want to call it, or any other autonomous zones, and how immediately it's all divided. People weren't working together. It's always about power. See, these folks were doing something authentic, I think, which is why it worked. And then they got rich, and then they left. So, and yes, honey, socialism sucks.
Much was unique about the Jewish state. But in choosing socialism as its strategy for development, Israel was part of a swelling tide. For the nations reaching for independence in the aftermath of World War II, state planning was held out as the quickest path to prosperity.
State planning, centralized planning. And I don't think it is at all. I think, if anything, it's the quickest way to poverty.
60 nations in the developing world would eventually adopt some form of socialism. Most were in Africa.
Most are all failed states. India got rid of its socialism, more or less.
The country that became known as Tanzania would provide the world with a leader whose vision of socialism fused the ideas of the West with the traditions of Africa.
All right, guys. Well, that's where we'll leave that, because that's getting into another section. And let's read some of the vampire economy. Now, guys, I'm not going to be able to read this whole thing to you. It's a book. It's a dense book. I should have brought up my copy up here. But you'll see, regardless, it's... well, I'll show you the chapter and page breakdown. So we'll go with that. We'll start with that. So also, anyone just now showing up, if you're new here, whatever, appreciate you showing up. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. That helps me out tremendously, helps the channel grow. I've been getting about 1 or 2 subs a day, aside from posters that I convinced to sub to my channel. I didn't have to convince her. She actually volunteered. In any case, so there's that. Obviously, if you wish to donate, there is an entropy. You can donate on DLive, and you can donate on Subscribestar if you want to help my family out. And not that I'm really even trying to draw money out of there right now, but you can do that. But the most important thing is really helping the channel grow. I have a feeling if I write this novel, if it picks up, my channel's going to grow all of a sudden overnight. If people figure out who I am, given that I'm writing, we'll be writing under a pseudonym most likely. So anyways, here's an illustration from the vampire economy of how a auto manufacturer has to get 5,000 tires for his car. And this is, of course, June 2nd. It says, executive and auto plant decides to purchase 500 rubber tires. Plant's leader of defense industry okays this. Employee contacts man. And then it goes to the trade group, and then the chamber of business, then the labor front, then the party secretary. And then on June 17th, you have to contact man, import control board, the Reichsbank, foreign exchange broad, and it just keeps going around. July 5th, and more bureaucracy they have to go through. Foreign exchange board, permit. Finally, on August 6th, they get the okay from all these people with the permit to purchase these tires. That's how this worked. Don't tell me that this was free market capitalism. Then they go to the cartel for the tires. One rubber tire for Aristotle tires, I don't know what that is, increase the cost by 200%. And it just keeps going. And you see the dates and the dates and the dates get further and further. And then down here's the War Economy Council. And the point of this is to show you that there is just a ton of red tape to do something so simple. All right, let's keep going here. Now, I've read this before, a long time ago, but I mean, on here, I've read it before, but you know, it's one of my earlier videos, and I didn't have overlays up yet because I couldn't get, for some reason, I couldn't get OBS running. It had something to do with my my graphic settings, I think. In any case, so this is the preface to the Vampire Economy. This book may be helpful as an answer to those burning questions. Why did Hitler start another war? How did it become possible that the Fuhrer could lead millions of intelligent and cultured people who hate senseless slaughter into a war which must have devastating effects upon Germany as well as upon the whole of mankind? We cannot be satisfied with the answer that Hitler is a madman and that the German people are fools and slaves willing to go to war to satisfy a madman's dreams. Yeah, that answer is overly simplistic. There is more to it, as I was showing you. Most people in Germany are like in other countries, hardworking and decent, with human qualities as good and as bad as those of other people throughout the world. But a system has been built up which has enabled one man to decide about war or peace. A system which held and still holds a whole nation in its iron grip and does not allow any individual German to escape the inherent fatalities of this regime. Fatalism, which was typical of the spirit of the German businessmen before Europe was plunged into this war, was not due to economic difficulties alone, but far more to a feeling that he had become part of a machine inexorably leading him to disaster. German businessmen once believed that the Fuhrer would lead them into a world of happiness and prosperity. They were willing to accept the first measures of regimentation as necessary but temporary emergency acts. They thought that the raids against the Jews and the sadistic brutalities of the brown shirts as an excess of uncontrollable elements which should soon disappear. Now, for a little parallelism, we can consider this the same for all the lefties that basically give cover to Antifa and BLM, including those who are on the mainstream legacy media. When they cover for them, they're doing the same thing as allowing the excesses of the brown shirts. Now, I know this comparison has been made before by many people, especially when Antifa was coming into the public conscious. But it is the truth. It's how these things work. They don't operate any different, guys. There is a very, very specific and deliberate route to revolution. And we know this because, well, we can see it happen over and over again. Very rarely is a nation and all of its people doing really well and a revolution comes. Revolutions come when factions get in and they promise things that they can't basically deliver on. And as they're promising those things that they can't deliver on, the inflation and everything else happens, all the stuff that we just read about, the cultural degeneracy, yada, yada, yada. And eventually, when things get so far and fall apart, the strong man comes in, or there's a military coup. It's one or the other. Sometimes it's both. But it goes something like that. 14 days to slow the spread. That's right. That is right. Those who hate bureaucracy and regimentation had been compelled to participate in the construction of a system which could end only in war and destruction. They had been made part of a monster machine steered by a Führer who was responsible to nobody. This totalitarian Frankenstein could not exist peacefully. It could not transform armament productions into production of consumption goods, thus ending the war scare and creating another era of prosperity. Nor could it wait for the peaceful exploitation of new conquest, which, as a matter of fact, were not sufficient to correct the shortage of basic raw materials. Any attempt to create a new era of peace would have a major crisis economically and politically for the totalitarian regime, and this would have met the end of all far-reaching imperialist plans. Sacrifices and investments made in preparation for imperialist expansion and for world rule would have been in vain. The gradual decay of the totalitarian regime would have been inevitable had the Führer chosen peace instead of war. You must understand this. The war machine is always a driving impetus of power, and it's a giant motivation, but what it always does in the end is it destroys the people, of course, and creates, all of the horrible bloodshed and murder, of course, the plundering of those folks' lives and often their nations, if one nation destroys another. History is revengeful. Dictators are also dictated to by the necessities of their own regime. The logic of the machine crushes the constructor and turns him into its slave, says Emil Ludwig. We do not know that Adolf Hitler thought about Germany's capacity for waging totalitarian warfare excuse me, guys, when he decided to march into Poland and thus began a new world war. It may be that he was convinced he would get yet another Munich without a large-scale war, or that he could conclude a peace with honor with Poland as a Nazi protectorate. A few weeks after the outbreak of a war with the Western powers, yet he must have realized that this war might become a major conflict lasting many months, perhaps even years. How long can the Nazi economy stand the strain of such a war? Well, I can tell you right now that I've read the writings, and Hitler very specifically wanted to spread Nazism across the world, just like he were a Bolshevik. So I'm not sure where Riemann's coming at from this, but maybe he didn't quite understand that at the time. Again, he's writing this, guys. He's hiding. He's underground, essentially, during the Weimar Republic, during the Third Reich, during wartime. He's writing this as a communist hiding from the Nazis. During the last pre-war years, tremendous economic preparations were made for this conflict. German army experts had worked out two schemes, one in preparation for a short blitzkrieg or lightning war, the second for a long totalitarian war of attrition. The first plan was completed during the first 4-year plan. Then preparations for a longer totalitarian war were pushed through. Also, folks, this was revenge. This was a war of revenge, right? The convoluted nature of how the First World War got started is a topic maybe we can delve into in the future. It wasn't just, obviously, the Archduke Ferdinand's assassination. There was a lot there. But as far as Germany goes, they weren't really the bad guys. They weren't expanding all over the place. They were in France and whatever else. But that's because of all these political ties and alliances and things that they had set up, right? The entangling alliances is the standard answer that you get in high school. But you weren't being told in that standard high school class that Germany was blockaded and they were being starved out. And, there was a lot of not good stuff going on there. Wilson was sending over ships that were full of armaments. This is what got us into the war, by the way. In accordance with these plans of the German General Staff, the Third Reich was getting ready for a 2-year totalitarian war. But what such a war meant in practice depended on who was to be the enemy and who the ally. It is impossible to have a hand sufficient stocks of all essential materials needed for a totalitarian war of even a single year's duration. According to all estimates, Nazi Germany's fuel reserves during the Munich crisis would have been sufficient for a totalitarian war of not more than 4 months. But these same reserves might be quite sufficient if Romanian, I guess, and the Russian oil is available in large quantities. Furthermore, the consumption of materials in a totalitarian war depends on whether an aggressive or defensive war is being contemplated. If, for instance, the war becomes purely defensive on all fronts and no large-scale offensives are carried out, consumption of war materials will be considerably less than in an offensive war, and the economic reserve of Germany militarism will last longer. But a defensive war cannot last forever, and Germany's economic reserves will be exhausted earlier than those of the Western powers if the latter are able to import materials from overseas. So this guy, during the war, is talking about how the war would play out and all of those things. Very interesting. He's going to get into the economics of things. Real quick, before we finish the preface here, I'm just going to check chat. You guys are listening there nice and quietly, like a bunch of good little students. Anyways, all right. The whole aspect of Germany's wartime economy seems to have changed as a result of Stalin-Hitler pact. This pact assured the Third Reich that the Soviet Union will not stop exports to Germany, even in wartime. Russian oil, manganese, foodstuffs, and necessary materials will be available during the war according to the terms of the treaty signed on the eve of the war's outbreak. This pact is helpful to Hitler in overcoming economic deficiencies and enabling him to avoid an early collapse of the military machine. Yet the economic significance of this pact may be overestimated. Stalin and Hitler did not decide to pool their economic and military forces. They are unlikely to do that because they do not sufficiently trust each other. Stalin will, however, sell Russia's products to the German militarist if he gets cash or other goods he needs in exchange. The size of this wartime trade will depend on the capacity of the Third Reich to pay for importers. Reserved for foreign currency or gold are negligible. Exporters of German manufactured goods are restricted by the urgent demands of the army for the arms and ammunitions. The financial plight of the Third Reich makes it impossible to finance imports in unlimited quantities. Therefore, quantities. Therefore, the pact with Stalin may enable Hitler to put up some more stubborn and longer fight, but will not necessarily solve his raw material difficulties. And of course, we know what happened. We know that he betrayed Stalin, and things didn't go well after that. Germany was fighting on multiple fronts and had overexpanded. Germany's military strategies would have preferred a lightning war, for only a quick victory would be a real victory. A long drawn-out war threatened economic collapse would inevitably spell defeat, whatever the military result. Again, notice that the long drawn-out war and economic collapse. What have we've been at war in the United States, well, pretty much since our inception. But I mean, in the modern age today, right? We've been at war for 20 years. There are children who were born after 9/11 who have now served in the military and fought. That's crazy. Why are we there? Well, reasons, right? Lots of reasons. Lots of reasons. Globalist reasons. Hitler could not have expected a quick victory against the Western powers when he decided to march into Poland. With Great Britain and France fully mobilized, the armaments race had put a much heavier strain upon the economy of the Third Reich than upon the other countries. In no other industrial country were raw materials so scarce and the replacement of vital parts of the industrial machine so neglected as in Germany. And by the way, Germany became the economic machine that it is today because of us paying them out during the Marshall Plan. So, now they had the know-how. I mean, everyone knows about German engineering. Germany's always had a strong industrial and cultural center, but it would not have come back to normal had the United States basically not bailed them out as well as the rest of Europe, right? And yes, I know there were two Germanys. I know that, I grew up through that. I was around when the Berlin Wall was taken down. I remember watching it on TV as a kid. So, we have to understand these things, and we know that East Germany was terrible. So it's a terrible place to live, like the rest of the Soviet bloc. And then the funny thing is we talk about all these things and all the war and how terrible Hitler was for invading all these other countries. And what happened? Well, the Soviets just did it. They just went down the line. They got Ukraine, Yugoslavia. They got Czech Republic, all those places, man. Poland, right? So everything that Germany would have taken was just given to Russia and the commies. And the commies won, and they fought the German Nazis. I mean, it's the bottom line. Did we help? Absolutely. Absolutely did we help. But this is, these things have to be understood. The economics have to be understood. If we don't have this, then we are going to have this understanding. We're going to fall back into it. We're going to talk about these things improperly, as most people do. What is it? Hunter Avalon likes to talk about the Nazis being capitalist all the time. And I'm like, dude, I'm just punch you in the face, dude. Like, like you don't know what you're talking about. You never read a book. You're just a dumb kid still. I know he's got a baby and a wife and whatever, but of course I don't really watch him. I used to because just the entertainment factor. But he's not well read. He's just a guy with opinions. The extent of the economic decay which preceded this war will be eradicated in this book. Not eradicated, and indicated in this book. Sorry, guys. True, the German War Economic Council has kept in store vast quantities of raw materials and other products essential for wartime economy. But even if all shortage possibilities were fully used, such preparations would have been sufficient at best only for lightning war lasting no longer than a couple of months. Meaning Germany didn't have its own wealth at the time. Let's see, Joshua says, revolution historically happens when citizens pay 40% or more of their income for food, and we are getting, yep. Yeah, I was talking about this the other day. This was something that Max Kaiser was talking about on Tim Pool's show, last Monday, I think. And he was hitting on that point hard. That was a really good podcast, by the way, guys, if you want to watch, except for when he started yelling and screaming, making weird voices. Not that I do anything different on here, but yeah. The deficiencies of wartime economy are important and eventually decisive in a totalitarian war. Yet it is impossible to foretell when a military system will collapse as a result of a deficiency in foodstuff, raw materials, or other economic factors. As long as the state machine is in order, it has the power to cut down the consumption of the general public and to reduce almost to eliminate expenditures for the renewal of the industrial machine. The proportion of the national income or of its industrial production spent for armaments is elastic. It is possible to increase production of arms and ammunition even with reduced supplies of raw materials. This can be done by drastically limiting production of consumption goods, by putting the population on a starvation rations, and by letting vast sectors of the economy decay. How far this can be done is not merely an economic question, but is also a question of morale and of effectiveness of the totalitarian police forces. It's interesting that he speaks of this, though, because this is, and he was a commie, this is what the commies do. Is it not? Even if they don't go to war. Starve them out. That's what they do. Therefore, especially in a totalitarian war, the factor of morale is important as the supply of war materials. This becomes clear as we examine the manifold experience of businessmen under fascism, as well as the particular developments of business practices in a totalitarian state. We might and must assume that Hitler is well aware of the dangers to which he has exposed himself and his system by beginning this war. His economic and political experts will have carefully considered any conceivable crisis. They will have organized the state power in such a way that they may hope to keep intact even during the most perilous times. They are prepared to crush all internal opposition, even in the case of the serviced wartime difficulties. They will suppress all but a few friendly private interests, compelling all other individuals to sacrifice everything for their monstrous system. The conservative forces, all those who still own private property and who are not closely related to their supreme leadership, will be expropriated and their property rights will be wiped out. What does that sound like to you folks? I just want you to see this highlighted. You're not going to highlight on me? Here we go. This is a communist talking about the fascist, and he's saying the conservative forces, all those who still own private property, something he didn't agree with because he was a communist, and who are not closely related to the supreme leadership, will be expropriated and their property rights will be wiped out. The businessman who is an isolated individual in the gigantic and reckless totalitarian state is the helpless prey of his fascist masters. You'll own nothing and you'll love it. That's right, Josh. The totalitarian dictatorship will become more ruthless in its attitude toward businessmen as well as toward the workers and middle classes. The so-called radicals among the party bureaucrats will claim that their program has been fulfilled after the expropriation of most private property holders, while simultaneously the ruin of the middle class will be completed and the workers will be exploited on an unprecedented scale. Now, Yes, and yes, and yes. But why does Riemann understand this? Well, I would say because he understands how the communistic systems worked. Now, he didn't agree with it. He didn't agree with his totalitarianism, but he did believe in communism, guys. So, and this is what they do. This is what the communists do. It's no different. It's the same thing. No private property. Do you think Nazis are capitalist? No, they're not. They never were. That's absolutely absurd. This development is not unwelcome to Nazi party leaders. These leaders were extremely unpopular before the war broke out. Germans were beginning to place upon them the responsibility for the growth of the corrupt bureaucracy. The party leaders would have had to ensure a purge had peace been preserved. They had reason to fear that during a peacetime depression, the Fuhrer might, while renouncing his world imperialist dreams, throw them overboard to increase his own prestige. Instead of such a development, it is the turn of the party leaders, the Nazi stormtroopers, to dictate. The author is reminded of the discussion at the beginning of Mussolini's Abyssinum campaign and the Italian friend who held an important post in the fascist state despite his secret anti-fascist sympathies. The author asked, why is Mussolini so mad as the start of his Abyssinian adventure? I don't know enough about Mussolini's war effort, guys. I'm not a big war history buff. That's just not my take on things generally. I learn enough about it and to understand it. I'm more interested in the systems behind it, the philosophical, ideological systems that have taken place, which is why I'm reading this. When he must realize that his gains will never equal that he must spend for his conquest. From the military point of view, the war in Abyssinia will weaken rather than strengthen him. The so-called radicals and the fascist party bureaucracy, the Italian friends replied, are jubilant about this war. They expect the economic difficulties in wartime to strengthen their authoritarian control of the so-called conservative forces. These will be weakened by further measures of expropriation. Those who still have privileges and property rights will live in fear that they may lose everything and that they will perish too if the dictator should break down. Or the dictatorship should break down, that is. Similarly, Nazi leaders in Germany do not fear possible national economic ruin in wartime. They feel that whatever happens, they will remain on top, that the worse matters become, the more dependent on them they will be purported classes. And if the worst comes to worst, they are prepared to sacrifice all the interests to maintain their hold of the state. If they themselves must go, they are ready to pull the temple down with them. And that was from New York, September 8th, 1939, or to New York maybe. I don't know. I thought he was still in Germany at this point, but hard to say. So guys, that was the beginning there, right? That was 14 pages in of a 368-page document. So I'm not going to be able to read all this. I will read some of these chapters, though, as we go along. What happened to business, that kind of stuff. That first chapter is very, very important. And you can see here, destruction of the sanctity of private property, corruption, money powered against absolute power, the contract man, raw material distribution, etc., etc. So he goes through this. And you can get this book for free as a PDF, as I'm reading it right now, over on the ludwigvonmises.org. So if anyone is interested in that, I highly suggest you read this. Now, I'm not, I know not everyone's a reader, and I don't read like I used to. I tell you often. But it is good to be educated. So if you can't read it, at least join me here on the stream, because I'll be going through this week. Before I get out of here, though, I do want to go through some Bastiat. I have a few things that, there's always stuff to talk about. There's always things to talk about. But I have a few things that I would like to get into maybe later this week as well, like Manichaeism in American politics. I'm going to go through this, though, because I don't know if I quite agree with these opinions. Here's actually a master's thesis Political Manichaeism and Progressivism, a study of Augustinian and Millennium freedom. And Augustine was a Manichaean, folks, the former saint. Oh yeah, and I have this, the book Blood Harvest, you can get on PDF, for the Falun Gong. I would like to get into this at some point, but you know, time is one of those things where you never have enough of it, do you? I got all week, and who knows what other news will come up too. I really thought I should cover that article though with the lieutenant colonel, because again, very relevant in keeping an eye on the pulse of our society. And when the military is starting to break down like that, man, is it going to be a bad time? This is how, things happened in the Civil War, the first American Civil War. Military started breaking off, staying with their states. People still considered their states back in their day like their nation. Understanding what the federal government was, but if you were Virginian, that's where you're from. You're a Virginian, or we still kind of do this in a colloquial way, but it's not the same way people thought about it. They thought very differently, and so this part of Virginia at the time said, well, we don't know. We want to be a part of this whole thing. This war, we want to break away. And so they started the process. And that was good. It was good that they did that. In fact, I think we need more of that. I think the states need to be broken down far more. I think there needs to be more layers of government as far as checks and balances and such. But with all that said, guys, let me check chat real quick. Stream through everything. Nobody's ever watched on D Live, Entropy or D Live today. But hey, whatever. Again, if you guys have just jumped in, please consider throwing me a like. Share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Texas and Texans still have primary loyalty to our state. Yeah, I would think so. I grew up in Maryland, so I made fun of West Virginians all my life because it was a joke. That and Pennsylvania, because people from Pennsylvania can't drive. I don't know why. They just can't. At least not in the southern part of Pennsylvania that I live nearby. So, yeah, but as I got older, between taxes and laws and whatever else, it's like, yeah, West Virginia's looking pretty good. So, and I'm pretty committed to staying here. I considered going elsewhere. My wife would not have it, though. She doesn't want to move further away from New York, where her family and stuff is at. So, so we're here, West Virginia. All right. So back to Bastiat's the law. We are at the political approach, and I believe that we are here because I wrote it down, and I said I was going to do that at the end of Friday's stream. So, and it's been a busy couple of days, guys. I mean, it didn't help that, I don't pay attention to how much I'm drinking when I start drinking generally. So yesterday was rough. Anyways, when a politician views society from the seclusion of his office, he is struck by the skeptical of the inequality that he sees. Spectacle. I don't know why I said skeptical. He is struck by the spectacle of the inequality that he sees. He deplores the deprivation, which are the lot of so many of our brothers. Deprivations which appear to be even sadder when contrasted with luxury and wealth. Perhaps the politician should ask himself whether the state of affairs has not been caused by old conquest and looting and by more recent legal plunder. Perhaps he should consider this proposition. Since all persons seek well-being and perfection, would not a condition of justice be sufficient to cause the greatest efforts towards progress and the greatest possible equality that is capable with individual responsibility? Would not this be in accord with the concept of individual responsibility which God has willed in order that mankind may have the choice between vice and virtue, and the resulting punishment and reward? I remind you all, if you haven't been listening to me throughout the week or anything else, I am a big fan of Bastiat, and this particular writing is pretty much my political philosophy. So if you read through the law, it's very well laid out, simple arguments. So yeah. Josh says, West Virginia and Tennessee are only other states I consider moving to. Yeah. Yeah. West Virginia has a great isolation factor. Although we did just get a new national park. I actually had this story pulled up. America has a new national park, but not all the locals are happy about it. But this picture here is essentially the state, which is pretty fine by me. And I'm in like the, not the furthest eastern portion, but nearly, and northeastern portion, and we're in the valley, so we have less mountains up here. But still, I'm looking at going south and west, or just west in West Virginia. And land, my friends, is still cheap there. So, anyways, back to this. But the politician never gives this a thought. His mind turns to organizations, combinations, and arrangements, legal or apparently legal. He attempts to remedy the evil by increasing and perpetuating the very thing that caused the evil in the first place, legal plunder. This is the basic principle of unintended consequences, but it's beyond that. It's beyond the unintended consequences, because they create these problems and then they just double down on them. Just like they created the healthcare problem we have currently in the United States, which they got involved with because they created the monetary problem of inflation here in the United States. This is how these things work. It is creating the problem that they can come in then and solve, which I don't know why, if someone comes in with a wrecking ball to your home, you want them to then build it for, rebuild it for you. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But I'd be like, you can pay me the money and I'm going to go find somebody else who's competent, right? We have seen that justice is a negative concept. Is there even one of these positive legal actions that does not contain the principle of plunder? Law and the charity. You say there are persons who have no money, and you turn to the law. But the law is not a breast that fills itself with milk, nor a lacteal veins of the law suspended from the milk or with the milk from a source of outside the society. Nothing can enter the public treasury for the benefit of one citizen or one class unless other citizens and other classes have been forced to send it in. If every person draws from the treasury the amount that he has put in, it is true that the law then plunders nobody, but this procedure does nothing for the persons who have no money. It does not promote equality of income. The law can be an instrument of equalization only as it takes from some persons and gives to another. When the law does this, it is an instrument of plunder. With this in mind, examine the protective tariffs, subsidies, granted profits, guaranteed jobs, relief and welfare schemes, public education, progressive taxation, free credit, and public works. You will find that they are always based on legal plunder organized in justice. The law and education. You say there are persons who lack education, and you turn to the law. But the law is not in itself a torch of learning which shines its light broadly. Look, guys, those of you, I know we all were raised in it. It's all what we do. But those of you who consider your children being in public schools, you are a fool if you do not educate them on your own, because they are just going to little indoctrination centers and they want to get them as soon as possible. They'll tell you stupid stuff that doesn't even coincide with child developmental learning, like out of the works of Jean Piaget, that where these kids need to socialize when they're like 2 and 3 years old. Well, 2-year-old just learned to walk generally and can barely speak. A 3-year-old, they can talk a little bit more, but they're not socializing with anybody. They play around people. They don't play with people. 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, you get a little bit different there, right? But what's wrong with being socialized within your family or the park or, amongst the other children? Why is it that society has to influence them? Why is it that they're not being controlled by the family? It was that video we watched earlier, right? Heaven on Earth, the kibbutz, and how they, had the it takes a village mindset. Now, I kind of believe in that mindset to some degree. I think if a kid's doing something bad, I'm not a modern parent who's like, you yelled at my kid, don't you ever do this, don't you ever do that, That's just straight egotism and ridiculous. At the same time, it's my kid. I'm going to take care of my kid, and I'm going to train my kid up the way I want to. Bottom line. So the commies, though, they don't want you to do that. And that philosophy actually, again, comes straight out of Plato's Republic. I haven't talked about the Republic in a while, but that's what they wanted to do, right? They wanted to take the brightest minds out, and they wanted to keep all the children from the families, and they wanted to have them be pure. And you could debate, I know people do, but Plato wasn't trying to build a communist utopia. It might have been more of just of a thought exercise, but whatever it was supposedly Socrates' grand society. And it's not a fun one, guys. It's a totalitarian society that assumes that those at the top are the mighty technocrats who know everything and can make everything happen. So anyways, let's get back into here. The law extends over a society where some persons have knowledge and others do not, where some citizens need to learn and others can teach. In this matter of education, the law has only two alternatives. It can permit these transactions of teaching and learning to operate freely and without the use of force, or it can force human wills in this matter by taking from some of them enough to pay the teachers who are appointed by the government to instruct others without charge. But in the second case, the law commits legal plunder by violating liberty and property. And then it indoctrinates your kids. So you have that too. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we started doing this is just absurd to me. This trend started in the United States and up north, and has basically just infested us. And we took on the school system, the model of oh crap. Why it's escaping me, I can't tell you. The Prussian system. We have the Prussian school system here that's meant to indoctrinate everybody and make them little good factory workers because, well, they were expecting with the Industrial Revolution everyone to be working in factories the rest of their lives. And if you want to read about the terrible troubles of school, John Taylor Gatto is a great person, and Scarlett Izzardbead is another one you should look into. I'll probably bring them up at some point on the show in the future. The law and morals. You say here are persons who are lacking in morality or religion, and you turn to the law. But law is force, and need I point out that a violent and futile effort it is to use force in the matters of morality and religion. He's saying, do I need to remind you how stupid that is? That like what are we going to do? We're going to put a sword in your face and say convert, like some people used to do? That's based in Augustinianism, by the way. That's why they would do that, because of his works and writings. It would seem that socialists, however, self-complacent could not avoid seeing the monstrous legal plunder that results from such systems and such efforts. But what do the socialists do? They cleverly disguise this legal plunder from others and even from themselves under the seductive names of fraternity, unity, organization, and association. And we just do it differently today. It's just about race and whiteism and whatever else. Same crap. Inclusiveness. These words sound similar to the words I just read. Inclusive, equitable, all of those things, yeah. Buzzwords, right? Because we ask so little from the law, only justice, the socialists thereby assume we reject fraternity, unity, organization, and association. The socialists brand us with the name individualists. But we assure the socialists that we repudiate only forced organization, not natural organization. We repudiate the forms of association that are forced upon us, not free association. We repudiate forced fraternity, not true fraternity. We repudiate the artificial unity that does nothing more than deprive persons of individual responsibility. We do not repudiate the natural unity of humankind under providence, or under God, that is. And this is what they do, right? Oh, you don't want fraternity? You're an individualist. You're an extremist. The Daily Beast, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a joke of an outlet, right? How far left and biased can you get? But the Daily Beast goes, oh, this guy is talking about Marxist conspiracy theories. Really? Because you're infested in the federal government right now. Everyone knows it. Everyone who pays attention. I know a lot of people make excuses about it. A lot of people go, well, I don't think it's really like that. I'm like, no, it really is like that, guy. And you're being dumb right now. You're being complicit to this, and you're allowing it to happen. Like I said, complicity theorists. A confession of terms. Socialism, like the ancient ideas from which it springs, confuses the distinction. This has got to be the best part of this entire thing. A confusion of terms. Socialism, like the ancient ideas from which it springs, confuses the distinction between government and society. As a result of this, every time we object to a thing done by government, the socialists conclude we object to it being done at all. We disapprove of state education. Then the socialists say that we are opposed to any education. We object to the state religion. Then the socialists say that we want no religion at all. We object to the state-enforced equality. Then they say that we are against equality, and so on and so on. It is as if the socialists were to accuse us of not wanting persons to eat because we did not want the state to raise grain. Or, I'll go one further with this, as I have before in the past reading this, or to put the freaking spoon in your own mouth. You should call up the government right now, because apparently you can't feed yourself, and they can hold your hand with a spoon in it and stick it in your mouth, you know. Or maybe you should understand that the government has a function, a proper function, that ensures negative rights and justice, and that's it. That's it. That's all it does. Everything else is tyranny, guys. Everything else creates tyranny. The influence of socialist writings. All right, I'm going to leave there. It is 5 o'clock, so good timing, man, on my part, I guess, with that. Yeah, that's definitely like my favorite line from this little pamphlet here. So let me write that down real quick, make sure I remember it, because you never know. All right. So, guys, I'm going to be getting out of here because I got, my wife dropped her car off to get detailed because the baby's coming, and, you know, she's got dog hair in there, and, yeah, everything's just got to be clean because, you know, nesting. That's how it works. I didn't realize I was slightly asymmetrical there, but hey, whatever. You guys have to look at me. I don't have to look at myself. All right, so real quick, gonna check on chat. So DLive and Entropy are blank all day today. Guys, if you do want to, again, donate, there is a subscribe star. You can do it on Entropy or DLive. But please, the biggest thing, like, share, and subscribe. Help the channel grow. Go put me out in your favorite forum somewhere. If you like what I do, if you like this kind of content. Again, guys, if you weren't here in the beginning, earlier when I talked about this, I'm not going to be able to stream Thursday. I have to go down to the birthing center, which is in Chantilly, so it's a good hour away. And we, you know, we're just playing this thing by ear right now. We're at 9 months. She's due on the 14th next month, right? But who knows? Who knows when that'll happen? So if I disappear, I'll probably end up putting a little video up through my phone or something and saying, hey guys, it's going to be a little bit. I'll be back. But this is why I'm live streaming. Happy wife, happy life. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay for dad to be miserable. I'm not a fan of those sayings. But guys, I also want to remind you, if you didn't see, we were live with Aiden Paladin yesterday at 3 p.m. over on the Ends Justify the Memes, so you can go check that out. And Joshua Ham, who is in our chat, will be with us this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Otherwise, I'll be back here tomorrow at 3, and I don't have anything going on, I don't think so. Maybe I'll stream a little longer than 2 hours, but otherwise, I got to get out of here, man. So you all take care of yourselves. I hope you enjoyed this. I will be back tomorrow. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill. And guys, I wish you all well.